I have always thought of anytime I think about my future, I have just always thought of myself being a pastor of in a congregation, and then also being involved in nonprofit work, and I guess most of the people that have been immediately close to me have been bivocational ministers, and so I'm just curious to hear from your experience and how you feel. What you think are some of the pros and cons, or maybe we should say joys and challenges?
Yeah. So, one model would be what our church had at one point. We had a pastor that was full-time, but the church valued her work in the community. And so in a lot of ways, she had I'm a full-time pastor, but my church allows me to, or encourages me to be out in the community providing leadership. But I really do think we're going to see a lot more bivocational ministers. Our churches are smaller and may not be able to pay a full-time salary. So the idea that someone is going to be at a church and at a nonprofit is probably a pattern that will grow. So I think the joys in that are that you'd have a worshiping community that can undergird you in your work in the nonprofit sector, that you'd have a spiritual home that, I know that when I joined New Covenant, then it was Gay Lee, I was doing death row work and starting a program for death row inmates, families of death row inmates. And one of the things when we joined New Covenant, I said, my work is so draining that I come here to be refilled. And then, of course, now in reflection, I realize how ironic that was that this poor little white girl says her work is so draining, when now I know that every member of that church is being required to move in a white supremacy world and is being drained from that, and that they really come for the same reason. But I didn't recognize it as that. I only recognized my work as being intense. So, but I think having a congregation, it builds you up to have the spiritual strength to serve the community you're in, and that's a joy for sure. I think the pitfalls, I guess you'd say, is again to do both and to be healthy. You'll have to have really good boundaries, because neither job is ever done. A congregation, pastor can never, do enough. And in a nonprofit, it's the same way. There's always something else to be done. So I think a person who is bivocational should have really good boundaries, and they should have some things that really feed them, whether it's a relationship or a hobby or something that just gives joy in their life that doesn't have to do with either of those jobs. I think that would be important. I was not good at keeping boundaries in my early work, and I'm not really great at it now. So I think that's a skill that people would need to have. The other thing I would say is, and I have found, is it's so important that whoever's your life partner just choose your life partner really wisely, because that relationship is even going to allow you to kind of explore different ways of being in ministry and different callings that you have, or that person will limit how you can live out that calling. And so, I was really fortunate. I met my spouse here at the Disciples House, but we've been really lucky. I've been very lucky to have someone who shares my values, shares my view of the world and what our work is in the world, and so has been willing to really, it is kind of family sacrifice. I remember when I came home after having been away from being an executive director for a little while, and I said, I really feel like I need to be doing this. And I just saw him going, oh my gosh, because he knew what it would mean to be an executive director again. But it didn't take him any time to kind of regroup and say, yeah, if that's what you're called to do, then that's what we're going to do. So choosing your life partner well. Did I touch on enough that you wanted me to?
Yes.
Okay.
You talked about boundaries and self-care and all of that. For if you want to go into bivocational ministry, but then we know that in general everybody needs to have should have
something to enjoy.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what yours is.
Well, I love being outdoors. I think I kind of grew up that way, so I like being outdoors. I like taking really long walks, and I grew up in a hunting community, so being up and watching the sun come up, I love doing that. It's usually the time I have to myself. And so where we are right now, I actually have a great view of the East Nashville and how the sun comes up over that. I think the other thing that I've done is I say I take my life in seasons. So I had a season starting the prison work and for about 10 years, and I stepped away and I was at a hospice for a live. I was a chaplain for a live hospice for 3 years. That was very restful work. It didn't require didn't challenge my organizing ability. So then I left there and I went and started Renewal House, which works with women with addictions and their children. Stayed there for about a decade, and then I took a season of rest and I worked at the Community Foundation. And that, again, it was good work, but it wasn't overwhelming. And then, again, I started the Maddox. I was a startup director for the Maddox Fund. And so that's kind of been my rhythm of life, is taking it in seasons so that I can do the intense work in either social services or social justice, but I can also step away and renew my spirit through a season of work that's less demanding.
I love that, taking your life in seasons.
Yeah, it's worked for me, and it's even now. I think I told you I'm planning to step away from where I am in the next few years, and I don't think I'll retire. I think I have one other thing in me, but I think it'll be something in which I'll be more of a good follower, or a good coach or something, so that I don't expect to do a heroic leadership thing again, because it's really hard. I said earlier, as hard as I think it was for me and how much personal cost, so much more of a personal cost for my siblings of color, because because of white supremacy, they're disregarded, or they're devalued, or there's the trust that people place in me. They're more stingy with that trust with people of color, and it just it's both humbling but also enraging that that's the case, because many good organizations and programs that would be serving us very well today were underfunded, and that's why they don't exist right now. And so that's one of the things that the Maddox Fund is really trying to look at, and that is, what has our pattern been of making large grants to predominantly white organizations and small grants to organizations run by people of color, and how do we begin to turn that around and bring justice and funding to kind of core of what we're doing. So we actually wrote kind of our vision is that a world in which people and planet flourish together in regenerative systems free from oppression and threat. So we really do see that the good of the earth and the good of humanity are tied together, and that as long as there's threat and oppression, then none of us can thrive. So we're really looking towards work of liberation and justice at this point, versus, I think we early on looked at our work as we're a funding tool, and now we see that our work is very much tied to the liberation, our shared liberation.
All right, thank you so much.
It was fun to get to be here with you, really, because again, we worship together, but we don't really have as much time to sit and talk. So I appreciate your inviting me.
Yeah, and I appreciate you accepting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.